So I was fortunate enough, you look back in your life, I had several people that helped me get to where I am now as an almost 40-year-old, that helped me both professionally, personally on my athletic side. And Dan is certainly one of those people. Dan, I remember messing around with Dan when I was probably like 10 or 11 years old. Dan's really great at building relationships with folks. And so Dan and I had a pretty good rapport once we finally got to high school. And one thing we always hated was, in high school at least, was the New Year's Day morning practice. The 5 a.m. practice on January 1st every year just was dreadful, right? Swim team would always get together on New Year's Eve. We'd hang out, we'd watch movies, we'd eat pizza, we'd stay up really late, watch the ball drop, and then maybe we go to bed at 1, and you got to be up at 4:45 to be in the water at 5:30. We just were not into being at practice, right? Dan always comes in, he's chipper. Dan probably went to bed at 8 o'clock on the 31st, gets up, ready to go. And we had no interest in being there. And we were slacking through warm-ups. We were slacking through vertical kicks. I remember Dan came in and was like, you're either going to do the vertical kicks and you're going to put in 100% effort, or we're going to start doing hot 100s until you all throw up. And so we snapped back in shape pretty quickly and finished the workout, and then went home and took a nap, and then came back for 4 o'clock practice the next afternoon, or that afternoon.
I can't remember, were you part of reindeer games?
I was absolutely part of reindeer games. Absolutely. That was in the old pool. So there was a hole in the ceiling for like one of the tiles had started to corrode, and Eric Stanfield started throwing like pull buoys and kickboards and like whatever he could find up in this hole in the ceiling. And at some point, this is while we were waiting for Dan to come from work, because at the time Dan was also owned a mortgage company, right? And Dan was late, and we gave him like the 15-minute warning, right? And we all, after Stanfield had thrown all this stuff in the ceiling, we all walked into the locker room and started to change clothes and leave practice. We thought practice was canceled. And Dan comes in, 5 minutes after we started doing that. He's like, what are you guys doing? Like, well, practice is canceled. You're late. And he's like, no, absolutely not. I'm like, well, the rule, it's 15-minute rule, man. Like, it's over. We'll see you tomorrow morning. He's like, oh, and by the way, who threw all that stuff up in the ceiling? And no one answers. And Dan goes, fine, you want to play games? You want to play games with me? You want to play reindeer games? Let's go. 500 fly. All of you, warm up. Go. It was awful. Just awful. Every time we tried to change the scale of power, Dan reminded us who was boss.
Did he actually ever make you finish the 500 fly?
I think McDonald may have been the only one who finished the 500 fly, which makes sense, right? Because McDonald could do a 500 fly. McDonald did a 500 fly. Here's a tale of McDonald. He actually did it in a meet. Because the 500 free, you can do whatever.
So he did a 500 fly.
McDonald did fly.
Tabor,
500 fly.
That was that was actually my idea, and
it's a good idea.
Well, I felt really bad afterwards, but he ended up winning that event.
Right.
But I've had some guilt about that over the years.
You know what? It is what it is, man. I wouldn't feel guilty about it. It's a good story now. I remember it 25 years later.
Good point.
And then McDonald finished it probably like he just finished a marathon. McDonald always had very emotional gestures whenever he was done racing.
Yeah. Yeah, no matter what the time was, he was dead.
It didn't matter. He could swim 25 yards and then be like,
He called me the other day, and he's like, hey, do you remember the long course Olympic trial season? When I was a rising senior in high school, I was like, yeah, I remember. It was like the greatest season I ever coached, and I was like, yeah. And he goes, I was just thinking about how at juniors, I went 221 in the 200 fly. And he goes, and I really thought, he goes, I got dead last at juniors in the 200 fly. And he goes, and then like 4 weeks later, I went 203 and got a second swim at Olympic trials. And he's like, I was just thinking about that and how you got to stay resolute. You got to stay with the plan and persevere. And it was just funny to me because, you know, when he went to 221, I was like, oh yeah, things are fine. But privately, I was like, oh my God.
Oh my God, what happened?
Yeah, 221 is so bad. And and you know, of course, he looked like you made me think of it because he looked so dead. No matter what he swam, he always would look so dead. And he swims 221 at junior nationals. He really shouldn't even be there because he's ready for Olympic trials, and he gets dead last. Oh yeah, that's funny.
That was McDonald.
Yeah.
But look, it brings up a good case in point, right? Particularly one that I think is relevant for younger athletes, is that it takes perseverance. Not every day is going to be a good day. And it happens in athletics, it happens in your personal life, it happens in your professional life. Not every day is a good day. Just put your pants on, put your shoes on the next day and go to work and get it done. And eventually it'll work out.